She was cast out by her in-laws, and years later, she was the one who decided the fate of the family. That night she left the house with a single suitcase in her hand and an emptiness in her chest that seemed to echo louder than the rain. The sound of the gate closing behind her would become the last memory of a love she once believed was home. The rain fell in a thin, endless stream, soft enough to blur the garden lights, steady enough to wash away the outlines of what used to be hers. The steps on the porch glistened with water, and every drop that touched the azalea leaves seemed to echo louder than it should. Clara stood still before the door, holding a worn leather suitcase, the night wind cutting through the light fabric of her blouse. She didn't move. She didn't need to. The silence already said everything. Inside, voices still drifted faintly. The clatter of silverware, the clinking of glasses, and laughter forced enough to disguise the fracture that had just occurred. Dinner went on, even after everything that had been said. That was how the Ferraz family lived. Everything continued, even when something broke. Eduardo was still at the table between his parents. His hands were locked together over his napkin, his head bowed, his shoulders tense. He said nothing when his mother told Clara to go upstairs and pack her things. He said nothing when his father, calm but final, declared, "This situation can't continue." And now, as she stood outside in the cold, he still said nothing. The gate buzzer sounded. A car was waiting by the street, the hospital driver, sent as a silent favor from a colleague who didn't ask questions. Clara adjusted the strap of her suitcase and took a deep breath. Her eyes burned, but there were no tears left. They had already fallen, on the stairs between one suitcase and another, between a swallowed plea and a final look. Then, Donna Beatriz appeared at the doorway. The light behind her framed her face with cold precision. "I hope you understand," she said, her voice calm, deliberate, rehearsed. "This is for everyone's good." Clara met her eyes in silence. There was nothing left to say. For everyone's good, a sentence that sounded like a verdict. The kind of phrase spoken only by those who mistake control for love. Eduardo sat in the background, still motionless, his eyes fixed on his untouched plate. She waited for him to say something, a word, a gesture, a single "stay." But his silence was louder than every voice in that house. Clara took 2 steps back. The stone beneath her shoes was cold. She opened the gate slowly, the metal creaking through the rain. For a moment before leaving, she looked inside one last time. What she saw would stay etched in her memory for years. The table set perfectly, crystal reflecting the amber light of the chandelier, faces untouched, and the comfortable silence of people who believe they will always be the ones in control. She closed the gate behind her. The click of the latch was sharp, final. As the car drove away, Clara kept her eyes on the rear window, watching the house fade behind the trees. The windows glowed like open wounds. And in their reflection she saw her own face, pale, steady, tired. Inside the suitcase, a few clothes, some documents, and a folded ultrasound image tucked inside an envelope, an entire life reduced to what could fit in a single bag. The car moved quietly through the wet streets. Streetlights pulsed like heartbeats along the road. Outside, the city slept. Inside, the only sound was her breathing. Clara rested her forehead against the cold glass and closed her eyes. She remembered the first time she walked into that house, nervous hands, a simple dress, and his smile when he said, "Welcome home." Now, that same home was casting her out. For a fleeting moment she wanted to hate him, but it wasn't hate she felt. It was something deeper, emptier, a pain so vast it had no name. The car stopped in front of the hospital where she worked the night shifts. The clock on the dashboard read 11:47 p.m. The driver offered to help with her suitcase, but she shook her head. "Thank you, I'll take it myself." Her voice was calm, almost mechanical. Inside the sterile hallways, the scent of disinfectant replaced the expensive perfume of the mansion. Her footsteps echoed softly against the white tiles. Here, no one knew her story. Here names carried no weight, and walls did not judge. Only work existed. And work, she thought, was the one thing no one could take from her. In the locker room, she sat before the mirror. The dark circles under her eyes drew the outline of exhaustion, but her gaze still burned with quiet fire. She looked at her reflection for a long time, then opened the envelope and brushed her fingers over the black and white image of the ultrasound. "I promise," she whispered. She didn't say what, or to whom, but the promise hung in the air, silent, unshakable, like the sound of the gate closing behind her. Cut to the future, the same gate, the same white columns, the same garden. But now a golden plaque gleamed on the wall. Ana Clara Ferraz Foundation. A black car pulled up. A woman stepped out, elegant, composed, steady. Clara walked to the gate, her hand resting on the same latch that once shut her out. For a brief moment she hesitated, then smiled softly. She didn't know it yet, but everything was about to begin. And that first night had been the longest of her life. The clock on the hospital wall seemed to move slower than time itself, as if even the hours refused to move forward. Clara sat on the small metal chair in her quarters, her uniform hanging on the door behind her, her hands resting gently over a belly barely beginning to show. Outside, the city slept under the rain. Inside, something stirred within her, a quiet strength born from fear itself. It was as if her body already knew what her heart had yet to learn. Nothing would be easy, but everything would be possible. The next morning, she asked to stay on the shift. There was nowhere else to go. The hospital became her refuge, her shelter, her cage. She worked double hours, studied at night, and slept on a borrowed mattress in a room that smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. No one asked questions, and she was grateful for that. Other people's silence was what allowed her to breathe. And the months passed and her pregnancy grew. There were no baby showers, no photos, no gifts, only work and silence. Between dressing wounds and changing sheets, Clara would rest her hands on her belly and whisper made-up stories, as if speaking to someone who already understood what she couldn't yet say out loud. She named the baby Anna, a simple name, chosen alone in honor of her grandmother, who once taught her how to sew dresses and endure the unbearable. The older nurses knew. From time to time, they left small gestures, a piece of cake, a fruit, a smile. Tiny acts of kindness that hold a woman together when the world around her begins to collapse. Clara learned to smile again, not like before, but with quiet grace, as someone who still measures distance before allowing anyone close. The birth came on a January dawn, sudden, unannounced. Between contractions and shallow breaths, she was taken into the same delivery room where she had once helped so many others give life. Now it was her turn, alone holding her fate in trembling hands. Anna was born small, fragile, her cry brief, barely touching the air. There were no flowers, no applause, only the sterile hum of machines. The doctor placed the tiny body in Clara's arms. For a moment, time stopped. She felt the warmth of her daughter's skin, the faint scent of life. And then, the stillness. The baby's heart stopped before morning came. Clara didn't scream. She sat in silence, the kind of silence that knows some sorrows have no language. She caressed the baby's face and whispered, "You'll live in me, even if the world never knows you." And the days that followed came like fog. She worked without rest, perhaps not to think. At night she wrote letters she never sent, some to her daughter, some to Eduardo, who would never read a single one. She wrote about the hospital, the patients, the conversations she pretended not to hear, about what she felt watching families embrace after being discharged, and about what echoed inside her whenever she remembered that closing door. But each week, something changed. The eyes in the mirror began to lose the light of someone waiting and gain the calm weight of someone who had chosen. She was no longer the woman who left under the rain, no longer the wife cast out, nor the girl who believed love was a shelter. She was someone who had begun to understand that love sometimes is only the beginning of finding yourself whole. 2 years passed. Clara completed her specialization. She moved to Belo Horizonte with a letter of recommendation and the blue notebook that held her daughter's memories. Her first job was at a private clinic. and before long her quiet precision and steady gaze caught the attention of her superiors. She was respected, admired, and for the first time in her life, free. On Saturday nights, she rode the subway home, always sitting by the window, on the same worn seat. She liked watching the city lights flicker in the glass, faces rushing past, stories crossing hers for only a moment, lives that didn't need to know her name. In that anonymity, she found a rare kind of peace. One morning, she was called into the hospital's administration office. A new expansion project was being planned, and her name was among those being considered for leadership. Her heart beat differently, not out of ambition, but because of what it meant. It was quiet confirmation that she had won, not over others, but over the parts of herself that once doubted she could. That night, back in her small apartment, Clara opened the window and looked out at the city. The warm February breeze carried the scent of rain. She reached for her blue notebook and wrote a single sentence. "Everything they took from me, I rebuilt with my own hands." She closed the notebook slowly, placed it on the table and turned off the lights. That night, for the first time in years, she slept peacefully. But destiny, which has a habit of moving in circles, was quietly setting the stage. Across the city, in a boardroom filled with murmurs and polished suits, the name Santa Helena Hospital appeared on a business agenda. At the sound of it, a man lifted his head. Eduardo Ferraz, the same hospital where Clara now worked. She didn't know it yet, but the past had already begun to find its way back. 5:3. The ballroom shimmered in tones of amber and gold. Crystal glasses caught the light of the candles, and the gentle clatter of cutlery mixed with the carefully rehearsed hum of polite conversation. It was the annual Santa Helena Foundation dinner, a night of donations, speeches, and immaculate appearances. Clara never liked these events, but as the hospital's new coordinator, attendance was part of her duty. She arrived on time, discreetly. A simple black dress, elegant but not ostentatious, hair in a low bun, makeup subtle, eyes calm. She slipped in unnoticed, which to her was always a relief. Her gaze moved across the room. Colleagues, doctors, investors. Most knew her name, few knew her face. She was known for her precision, not her past, and that was exactly how she wanted it. As she reached for a glass of water from a nearby table, the host's voice echoed through the speakers. "Doctor." Eduardo Ferraz, representing Ferraz and Associates. The name cut through the air like a sudden crack of lightning. For a moment, Clara froze. The glass in her hand nearly slipped. The noise around her blurred into a single distant hum. Slowly, she turned, and there he was, walking through the golden light, surrounded by greetings and camera flashes. Eduardo, the same composed expression, the same controlled stride. But there was something different now. The lines around his eyes, the weariness of someone who had learned too late the cost of silence. Clara didn't move. She didn't hide, but she didn't seek to be seen either. Still, her heart betrayed her calm, its rhythm uneven, urgent, as if something long buried had suddenly awakened. Eduardo greeted people with the same polished charm, the same social smile. But when his eyes met hers, the world seemed to stop. No music, no voices, just the recognition and the quiet shock of seeing what time had turned them into. She held his gaze, unflinching. He took one step, then another, but before he could reach her, a colleague interrupted and the moment broke. Clara took the chance to slip away, moving quietly through the crowd until she reached the terrace outside. The air there was cooler. The city lights shimmered below, and the muffled sounds of the party felt distant, almost unreal. Clara placed her hands on the railing, breathing deeply, trying to calm the tremor inside her. It wasn't fear, it was memory. And memories have their own gravity, the weight of what can no longer be changed. Footsteps approached behind her. Eduardo stopped a few steps away. For a moment, he simply watched her, the quiet strength in her posture, the calm of a woman reborn. She sensed his presence but didn't turn. "I thought it was you," he said at last. His voice was lower now, rougher, as if time had passed through it too. Clara kept her eyes on the city. "And if it wasn't? Then I would have been mistaken again," he said. "But I'd recognize that silence anywhere." She turned slowly. Her face was serene, but distant. "The same silence you chose," she said, "when I needed your voice the most." There was no anger in her tone, only clarity, sharp and unwavering. Eduardo lowered his gaze, as if her words had found the place his pride had tried to protect. "I don't have excuses," he murmured. "Then don't invent any," she replied. The wind brushed a loose strand of her hair. He took a step forward, but she raised her hand slightly, a boundary, not a threat. "You've changed," he said quietly. "No," she answered. "I just stopped being who you expected me to be." They stood there for what felt like a long time, two people bound by what once was, divided by what had to be. "I've heard about your work," he said finally. "The foundation, the hospital, you built it all on your own." "Not alone," she corrected gently. "With people who believed in me when no one else did." He nodded, silent. Admiration flickered in his eyes, and discomfort too. The fragility he once knew in her had been replaced by something stronger, a serenity that disarmed him. "Clara," he began, his voice faltering. She lifted her hand again, stopping him. "Don't say my name," she said softly, "as if you still had the right to." Her voice was calm but absolute. The silence that followed was heavy with everything left unsaid. He looked as if he wanted to speak again, but didn't. Perhaps he finally understood that some regrets can't be explained. Clara turned back toward the horizon. "Time is strange, isn't it?" she said after a pause. "It doesn't change what happened, but it changes what we do with what's left." Eduardo exhaled slowly. "And what did you do, Clara?" She smiled faintly. No bitterness, no pride. "I survived." Applause erupted from inside. Someone's speech had just ended. Clara looked at him one last time. "Good night, Dr. Faraz." She said doctor the way someone closes a door, not with anger but with finality. As she walked toward the entrance, she paused at the door and added, "Funny thing about the world. It spins and spins, and somehow, one day, we all end up right back where it began." Then she left him standing there, motionless beneath the city lights. He watched her disappear into the crowd, and for a brief moment, he felt that destiny was quietly returning what he had once let slip away. But he didn't yet know that this was only the beginning, because the past never comes back the same. It returns only when you've already become someone else. The next morning brought with it a cold kind of light, the kind that seems to reveal more than it should. The hospital was quiet, filled only with the distant echo of footsteps and the steady rhythm of machines. Clara arrived early, as always. Her ID badge swayed against her coat as she walked the halls with the calm of someone who had learned how to move through chaos without being consumed by it. She had built a reputation for precision and composure, the kind of presence that inspires confidence without ever needing to demand it. But that morning something shifted. In the conference room, she found a document waiting on the table, a new partnership between the Faraz Foundation and the hospital. The signature at the bottom was unmistakable, Eduardo Faraz. Clara stared at the page in silence for a few seconds. The irony of destiny was too precise to be coincidence. When she left the room, her heartbeat hadn't yet slowed, not from fear, but from intuition. The past wasn't returning as a memory. It was returning as structure. 3 days later, the official meeting took place. The representatives from the Faraz Foundation arrived on time, flanked by advisors and consultants. Clara sat at the opposite end of the long table, posture flawless, eyes steady, her serenity worn like armor. Eduardo entered last. Dark suit, serious expression, a folder in his hands. He greeted the others politely, and when his eyes met hers, neither of them flinched. There was no surprise, only recognition, as if both had known this moment was inevitable. The hospital director began to speak about progress, investments, the importance of collaboration. Clara took notes, but her real effort was in controlling her breath. Every mention of his name carried weight, too heavy, too familiar, echoing through a space that now belonged to her. When the meeting ended, people drifted into side conversations. Eduardo walked over, keeping the distance of someone unsure whether he was welcome. "Your work here is impressive," he said evenly. "The team speaks of you with admiration." She didn't look up from her notes. "Work speaks for itself, Dr. Ferraz," she replied. "Words alone don't hold much weight." He hesitated. "Clara." "Dr. Ferraz," she interrupted, firm, unyielding. "That's the proper form of address here." The silence that followed was thick, almost tangible. He nodded, accepting the boundary she had drawn. But something lingered in his eyes, not the same guilt as before, something quieter, almost resigned. The weeks that followed were filled with meetings, reports, site visits, and long email threads, all perfectly professional on the surface. But underneath, a subtle current pulsed, a tension that neither could fully name, a glance that lingered too long, a pause that carried more history than it should. Then, one afternoon, the news arrived. The Ferraz patriarch had been admitted to the hospital. Cardiac complications. By decision of the board, Clara was assigned as the attending physician in charge. It was cruel irony. Now she would be the one responsible for the man who had once ordered her out of his house. When she entered the room for the first time, the air itself felt heavy, thick with old ghosts. The old man lay pale and motionless, eyes half closed. Beside him stood Donna Beatriz, still dignified, still proud, but aged, softened by time. When she saw Clara, her gaze hardened, the same sharp look that had banished her years ago. Clara's voice was calm, professional, detached. "Good afternoon. I'll be overseeing Mr. Ferraz's case." Beatriz's lips tightened. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said coldly. "I do," Clara replied. "I always have." Moments later, Eduardo entered, documents in hand, the strain visible in his face. His eyes moved between his mother and Clara, searching for a way to ease the inevitable collision. But there was no way out. Destiny had gathered the three of them in one room, the very place where all truths, eventually, must fit. In the days that followed, their forced coexistence became a routine. Clara worked with her usual precision, impeccable, controlled. Beatriz avoided speaking to her, but could no longer ignore her presence. Eduardo watched quietly from the edges. The woman his silence had once destroyed was now the only one holding his family together. One night, when the hospital had quieted into half-light, Clara finished her rounds and stepped out to the side terrace. The night air was cold against her face. The city shimmered in the distance, a sea of shadows and soft light. Moments later, Eduardo appeared. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly, "for taking care of him, after everything." Clara kept her eyes on the horizon. "I don't do it for them," she replied. "I do it because it's what I know how to do." He took a step closer. "Still, it's more than I deserve." She turned to face him. "I'm not doing anything for you, Eduardo. That's the difference between who I was and who I am now." The silence between them stretched, not heavy but full of truth. He leaned against the wall, his voice lower now. "When I saw you at that dinner, I realized the woman I knew doesn't exist anymore." "She does," Clara said softly. "She just learned how to protect herself." His eyes softened, not with regret, but with the quiet understanding of someone who finally knows that time never goes backward. Later that night, as Clara reviewed the patriarch's test results, she heard slow footsteps behind her. Beatriz stood at the door, her arms crossed over her chest. Her voice carried both pride and fatigue. "Strange, isn't it?" The way destiny works. Clara lifted her eyes. It tends to return what we take from others. Beatrice said nothing for a long moment. Then, silently, she turned and left. No more words were exchanged, but something had shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet. Something subtler. The first small sound of what would one day become reconciliation. And without realizing it, Clara had begun to write the first lines of her own redemption, not with vengeance but with presence. The days that followed became a sequence of silences and subtle collisions. Clara's presence, steady, unshakable, stirred the Faraz household like a memory no one knew where to hide. She spoke only when necessary, yet her calmness disturbed more than any confrontation ever could. Beatrice avoided the hospital during the day, but every night she appeared, sitting quietly beside her husband's bed, eyes fixed, face unmoved, as if waiting for Clara to make a single mistake, something that could justify the cruelty of the past. But Clara didn't falter. Every shift was flawless, every chart immaculate, every gesture precise, and paradoxically, that perfection unsettled Beatrice even more. It's hard to despise a woman who refuses to become small. One afternoon, a group of journalists gathered outside the hospital entrance. The Faraz Foundation was under investigation, allegations of financial misconduct, contracts signed long ago under the patriarch's management. Eduardo, now head of the legal division, fought to contain the scandal. Beatrice, however, wore her mask of composure as if nothing, not even truth, could reach her. That night, when Clara entered the hospital room to check the patient's vitals, she found Beatrice alone. The old man slept. Beatrice sat still, eyes lowered, expression hollow. When she noticed Clara's presence, she didn't look away. "So, this is how destiny takes its revenge?" she asked, voice flat. Clara closed the clipboard. "Destiny doesn't take revenge," she said. "It returns what's owed." Beatrice lifted her chin slightly. "Don't expect me to apologize." "I don't expect anything from you," Clara replied, serene. "I learned not to expect." A humorless laugh escaped Beatrice. "You speak as if you've won something." Clara's gaze softened. "Win," she repeated. "No, I just survived what you wished upon me." Beatrice turned away, uneasy. A long silence stretched between them. Then, quieter, almost to herself, Beatrice murmured, "You should never have entered that house." Clara replied calmly, "Maybe not. But what you never understood is that I didn't enter. I was invited." The words hung in the air, heavy, unshakably true. Beatrice said nothing, but for the first time, her gaze faltered. The next day, the patriarch's condition worsened. News spread quickly, and the Faraz home, once a fortress of power, became a house of tension and fear. Eduardo spent long hours at the hospital, weighed down by reporters, board members, and ghosts of his own making. Clara saw him often in silence, his tired face, his distant stare. It was strange to see the same man who once watched her exile in silence now unravel beneath the weight of his own regrets. Late one night, when the corridors had emptied, she found him sitting in the waiting room, hands clasped, jacket undone, the exhaustion visible in every line of his body. "You need to rest," she said softly. He looked up. "I can't." "That's not guilt," she said. "It's fear." He exhaled. "I'm afraid he'll die believing I destroyed everything." Clara paused, then answered, "He built his own downfall. You just inherited the fall." Eduardo gave a faint, weary smile. "You talk as if you've never fallen." "I did," she said simply. "The difference is, I learned how to rise without waiting for anyone to lift me." The silence that followed was thick, but not hostile. It was the kind of silence that exists when two people finally see each other without illusion. So as sur the next morning, the investigation deepened. The Faraz Foundation's name was everywhere. Headlines, broadcasts, whispers. Eduardo scheduled a press conference to address the scandal. The hospital board asked Clara to join him, As the medical coordinator of the Foundation's social programs, it was inevitable they would stand side by side before the cameras. The room was crowded. Flashes cut through the air like lightning. Reporters murmured in anticipation. Eduardo spoke first, his voice steady, though shadowed by fatigue. He spoke of ethics, of transparency, of rebuilding. Then it was Clara's turn. She rose, walked to the podium, and looked out at the crowd with quiet authority. "I came from a place," she began, "where the word foundation meant shelter. And that's what this institution must become again. A shelter." She paused. No legacy survives without truth, and no name endures without humanity. The room fell silent. Eduardo looked at her, motionless. At home, Beatriz watched the broadcast, eyes fixed on the screen. It was impossible not to see it now. The balance of power had shifted. The strength once used to destroy her now radiated from her. But that night, Beatriz returned to the hospital. Her husband slept, surrounded by monitors and tubes. Clara was on duty. They faced each other in silence. Beatriz approached slowly, sat beside the bed and spoke in a low voice. "Do you want to know what I felt the day he sent you away?" Clara didn't reply. "I thought I was protecting my son," Beatriz continued. "But in truth, I was only protecting my sense of control." Her words were harsh but honest. "I always believed love and control were the same thing." "They're not," Clara answered, "and that's what destroys most families." Beatriz looked up, her eyes tired. "And now? What will you do with us?" Clara took a slow breath. "What I've always done," she said, "care, even when no one cared for me." Silence filled the room. But it was different this time. Not tension, understanding. Something loosened between them, wordless, real. Hours later, the old man went into cardiac arrest. The room erupted in urgency, alarms, orders, motion. Clara led the team, her voice calm, precise, commanding. Eduardo rushed in just in time to see her fighting for the life of the man who had once signed her exile. And in that moment, he understood what he never had before. Her strength was never vengeance. It was compassion. When the monitor finally steadied, Clara checked the clock, nodded to the team, and the room fell back into stillness. The patient lived, barely. Eduardo leaned against the wall, drained. Clara turned toward him, still breathless. "Now," she said quietly, "what was out of balance begins to find its place again." In the days that followed, Beatriz changed. She arrived earlier, stayed longer, spoke less. Clara didn't know if it was remorse or simply the slow surrender of age, but something had softened, a quiet peace, the kind that comes after too many storms. Eduardo changed too. He spoke little, but his silence was gentler now, the kind that respects, not avoids. One rainy afternoon, Clara found him sitting alone in the hospital chapel, head bowed, hands still. Without looking up, he said, "If you ever forgive me, don't tell me. Just live." Clara stood beside him, her gaze on the empty cross. "Forgiveness isn't a gift," she said. "It's a process, and sometimes it begins the moment we stop waiting for an apology." He finally looked at her, and for the first time his eyes held peace. The past was beginning to bow before her, not because she conquered it, but because she had finally walked through it. Time moved inside the hospital with the slowness of a weary clock. Long days, sleepless nights. The hallways had found their own rhythm, a quiet pulse, as if life there flowed in a different frequency, one where everything happened in silence, and yet nothing ever stopped happening. Clara began avoiding the ICU floor when she wasn't on duty. Her constant presence had started to draw eyes, questions, whispers. Still, she returned every evening before going home. She would sit on one of the benches in the inner courtyard, the same place where families waited for news, and stay there for a few minutes. Sometimes she read through reports, sometimes she simply looked up at the narrow strip of sky visible between the windows. It had become her quiet ritual, the passage between what she carried inside and what she still had to face outside. Meanwhile, Eduardo seemed increasingly distant. The investigation surrounding the Ferraz Foundation deepened. He faced boards, hearings, journalists, each one demanding answers he didn't yet have. Beatrice, weakened, relied on Clara's discreet visits to keep her husband's treatment on course. The two women no longer exchanged sharp words. Time had worn down the edges between them, turning hatred into something quieter, an unfamiliar kind of respect. One afternoon, as Clara reviewed patient files, a nurse rushed in. "Doctor, Mr. Ferraz has relapsed." The sound of that sentence felt too familiar. Clara stood up at once. Her steps echoed through the corridor until she entered the room. Beatrice was there, sitting beside the bed, hands trembling slightly. The old Ferraz lay weak and pale, breathing shallowly, eyes half open. "He asked to see you," Beatrice said without meeting her gaze. Clara approached slowly. The old man's lips moved with effort. "I was wrong," he whispered, his voice fragmented. "There's nothing that can forgive me." Clara stood still for a moment, then spoke softly. "It's not forgiveness that erases the past. It's remorse that keeps it from repeating." He looked at her, eyes glassy, wet. A long, trembling sigh. And then, nothing. The monitor gave a long, continuous tone, sharp, final. Beatrice covered her face with her hands. Clara didn't move. Time stopped inside that room. A cycle that had begun with humiliation and silence ended now in silence again. But this silence meant something different. Faustu Ihakuwav of the funeral took place 2 days later, at the Ferraz estate, the same place where, years ago, Clara had been cast out into the rain with a suitcase and an empty heart. Now she returned, dressed in black, composed, standing at a distance. No one dared stop her, not even Beatrice. Eduardo saw her from afar and said nothing. He understood now. Some things can never be fixed with words. During the ceremony, the family's lawyer approached Clara and handed her an envelope. "Mr. Ferraz asked that this be given to you personally," he said. Clara opened it later that night, alone at home. Inside was a letter, handwritten, the paper slightly yellowed, the handwriting trembling but deliberate. "Clara, life taught me too late what power made me forget too soon, that no name is worth more than a just soul. You were the only one in this house who never wanted anything from us, and that's why we cast you out, because we didn't know how to face what we couldn't control. If there is justice beyond this life, may it grant me the forgiveness of the one I destroyed out of fear. Taimam Ferraz." Clara closed the letter gently. She stood by the window, the envelope between her fingers. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft, steady, rhythmic, as if the sky itself were marking the beginning of something new. A few weeks later, the will was read aloud. The room inside the old mansion was full. Lawyers, relatives, curious onlookers. Beatrice sat beside Eduardo, eyes distant. When Clara's name was mentioned, a ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. The lawyer read clearly, without pause. "To Mrs. Clara Nogueira, I leave the lifelong direction of the Ferraz Social Institute with full administrative and financial authority. May what was once used to humiliate now serve to restore." Silence fell like a heavy curtain. Eduardo lowered his head. Beatrice closed her eyes. Clara remained composed, no surprise, no triumph. She simply nodded in gratitude and walked out. In that moment, she understood. Destiny doesn't give back what was taken. It gives you the power to rewrite the ending. Nakia Fiwab, days later, Clara returned to the hospital. Life went on, but the air felt lighter somehow. People greeted her with respect, not because of her new title, but because of what she already embodied. As she walked down the main corridor, a little girl ran past her, dark hair, curious eyes that echoed something familiar. The child bumped into her and smiled. "Sorry, miss," Clara smiled back. A nurse hurried over. "Helena, how many times have I told you not to run here?" The name echoed inside her. Helena, the name she had once dreamed of giving to the daughter who never came. Her gaze softened, distant for a moment, but the smile remained. Maybe destiny had its own quiet way of returning what time never allowed. One bright morning, Clara was called into the foundation office. Eduardo was waiting. His face was calm now, a different man from the one haunted by guilt. When she entered, he stood. "I didn't come to talk about business," he said. "I came to talk about beginnings." Clara said nothing, only listened. "Beginnings don't erase the past," she said at last. "I know," he replied, "but sometimes the past exists only to teach us how to stay." There was a long pause. He continued quietly. "I read the letter. What my father wrote to you. I think he finally saw you, Clara, even if it was too late." Clara took a slow breath. "Late or not," she said, "sometimes being seen once in a lifetime is enough." Eduardo smiled softly. "I don't know what you feel now." "Neither do I," she answered, "and maybe that's the most honest thing we've ever said to each other." Silence stretched between them, gentle, unhurried. He took a step closer. "If I could go back—" "You can't," she interrupted softly. "But you can move forward, and sometimes that's enough." In the months that followed, the foundation transformed. Social projects blossomed, schools reopened, families were restored. Clara became the face of a new era, the quiet power of integrity reborn. Beatrice, now fragile and subdued, began to visit the institute, helping discreetly with donation campaigns. The two women, once divided by cruelty, learned a new kind of coexistence, not of affection but of respect. And one evening, as the sun dipped low behind the city, Clara stood by the window of her office, watching the light fade into gold. In the reflection she saw not the woman who had been cast out, nor the one who fought to survive, but the one who had finally understood that true justice isn't vengeance, that healing isn't forgetting, and that freedom isn't escape, it's peace. The past no longer chased her. It bowed to her, because she had walked through it and found herself whole on the other side. Time moved slowly within the hospital walls, like a weary clock reluctant to tick. Long days blurred into sleepless nights. The hallways took on a rhythm of their own, as though life there pulsed on a different frequency, one where everything happened in silence, yet nothing ceased to unfold. Clara began to avoid the ICU floor when she wasn't on duty. She knew her constant presence was beginning to stir whispers, glances, rumors. Still, she always returned at the end of each shift. She'd sit on one of the benches in the inner courtyard, the same ones where families waited for news, and remain there for a few quiet minutes, sometimes reviewing reports, sometimes simply watching the sky framed by the windows above. It was her ritual of transition between what was left behind inside and what she had to face outside. Eduardo, on the other hand, seemed increasingly absent. The investigation into the foundation had deepened. He faced committees, hearings, relentless journalists, all hungry for answers. Beatrice, now weakened, had come to rely on Clara's discreet visits to keep her husband's health from slipping further. The hostility between them had faded. Time had worn down the sharp edges, turning animosity into a strange kind of respect. One afternoon, as Clara reviewed patient files, a nurse rushed in. "Doctor, Mr. Faraz has taken a turn." The sound of those words felt all too familiar. Clara stood immediately. Her footsteps echoed through the corridors. When she entered the room, Beatrice was seated at the bedside, her hands trembling slightly. The elder Faraz struggled to breathe, his eyes half open. "He asked to see you," Beatrice said, not looking up. Clara stepped closer. The man, pale and frail, moved his lips with effort. "I was wrong," he whispered, his voice thin and broken. "There's nothing that could forgive me." Clara stood silent for a moment. Then she answered, "Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but regret can keep it from repeating." He looked at her, tears gathering in his eyes, a long, heavy breath. And then, nothing. The monitor let out a sharp, continuous tone. Beatrice brought her hands to her face. Clara stood still. Time stopped in that room. A cycle that had begun with humiliation and silence ended there, in silence again. But this time, the silence meant something else. Sartulbo Simakiagaris, the funeral took place 2 days later, at the old Faraz estate, the very place where, years earlier, Clara had been cast out, suitcase in hand, tears held back. Now, she stood there again, dressed in black, quiet, at a distance. No one dared stop her, not even Beatrice. Eduardo watched her from afar, saying nothing. He knew. Some things can't be resolved with words. During the service, the family lawyer approached Clara. He handed her an envelope. Mr. Faraz had this included in his will. He asked that it be given to you directly. Clara opened it later that evening at home. Inside was a handwritten letter, the penmanship shaky, the paper slightly yellowed. Clara, life taught me too late what power made me forget too soon. That no name is worth more than a just soul. You were the only one in this house who never wanted anything from us. And that's exactly why we cast you out, because we didn't know how to face what we couldn't control. If justice exists anywhere beyond this life, may it grant me forgiveness from the one I destroyed out of fear. A. Faraz. Clara closed the letter slowly. She stood at the window, the envelope still in her hand. Outside, rain had begun to fall. The drops tapped against the glass in steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of a new beginning. And a few weeks later, the will was officially read. The mansion's sitting room was crowded. Lawyers, relatives, heirs, onlookers. Beatrice sat beside Eduardo, her gaze distant. When Clara's name was mentioned, a wave of murmurs rippled through the room. The lawyer read in a steady voice, "To Miss Clara Noguera, I leave the lifelong directorship of the Faraz Social Institute with full administrative and financial authority. May what was once used to humiliate now serve to heal." The silence that followed was absolute. Eduardo lowered his head. Beatrice closed her eyes. Clara, composed, showed no reaction. She simply nodded and left the room. In that moment she understood. Life would never return what had been taken from her, but it had handed her the power to rewrite the ending. Days later, Clara returned to the hospital. Life went on. But somehow, the world felt lighter. People greeted her with respect, not because of her new title, but because of what she had always represented. As she walked through the main corridor, she saw a young girl about 7 running in the distance. Dark hair, familiar eyes. The girl bumped into her and smiled. "Sorry, Auntie," Clara smiled back. The child's mother, a nurse, rushed over. "Helena, how many times have I told you not to run in here?" The name echoed within her. Helena. The same name she had once dreamed of giving the daughter she never got to meet. Clara's gaze softened, distant for a moment, but the smile remained. Maybe destiny has its own quiet ways of returning what time could not. One sunny morning, Clara was called to the Foundation's office. Eduardo was there, waiting. He looked calm, no longer the tormented man from before. When she entered, he stood. "I'm not here to talk about business," he said. "I came to talk about new beginnings." She looked at him in silence. "New beginnings don't erase the past." "I know. But sometimes the past teaches us how to stay." A long pause, then he added, "I saw the letter. I read what my father wrote to you, and I realized he saw you in the end, even if it was too late." Clara took a deep breath. Late or not, sometimes being seen once in a lifetime is enough. Eduardo offered a faint smile. "I don't know what you feel right now." "Neither do I," she replied. "And maybe that's the most honest thing we've ever said to each other." The silence stretched between them. He took a step closer. "If I could go back—" "You can't," she interrupted gently, "but you can move forward, and that's already a lot." In the months that followed, the Foundation transformed. Social programs flourished, schools reopened, families found support. Clara became the face of a new era. Beatrice, more fragile now, began showing up quietly to help with donation drives. The two women learned a new kind of coexistence, absent of affection, but built on mutual respect. One afternoon, Clara found Eduardo in the garden of the Institute. He was watching children play. The sun was sinking behind the buildings, tinting the sky with a melancholic golden hue. He turned to her. "I never thought I'd live to see my family reborn like this." Clara replied, "Sometimes rebirth comes from those who had no choice but to start over." They stood side by side in silence. A gentle breeze swept through, carrying the scent of freshly tended flowers. Eduardo looked at her and said, "Thank you for not becoming what they expected." She met his gaze softly. "I just chose not to lose myself trying to prove I deserved to stay." The sun disappeared completely, and in the place where old pain once lived, there was only a new calm, a peace built through endurance. She had been cast out by her in-laws, and years later, she was the one who decided the family's fate. But what no one ever knew was that deep down, Clara never longed for revenge. She longed for peace. The months that followed unfolded with the deceptive serenity of a life that finally seems to be in place. But beneath the surface, Clara could feel an undercurrent, a subtle tension, the quiet knowing that something remained unresolved. The Institute was thriving. Donations were increasing, projects were multiplying, and Clara, once nearly invisible, had become a public figure. News outlets shared stories of her journey, her leadership, her resilience. But the more the city applauded her, the louder the past seemed to whisper her name within the old Faraz mansion. Beatrice, now fragile, watched from a distance. She rarely left home, and when she did, it was for discreet appearances at Institute ceremonies. The glances exchanged between her and Clara were brief, formal, but no longer poisoned. There was a silent truce between them, born from exhaustion and recognition. Eduardo, meanwhile, remained restless. He visited the Institute often, always careful not to cross the line between business and something more. Still, each encounter carried the same unspoken tension, the weight of two people who had known each other deeply, pretending not to remember. It was late afternoon when Clara got the call. Beatrice had been rushed to the hospital. Cardiac complications. The same hospital, the same corridors, the same room. Everything felt like a reflection of the past, but with the roles reversed. When Clara arrived, Eduardo was standing outside the room. His face was worn, the posture of someone reliving something they no longer knew how to bear. He turned at the sound of her steps. For a moment he said nothing. Then he murmured, "She asked for you." Clara entered without hesitation. Beatrice was awake, pale, her eyes tired. When she saw Clara, something softened in her expression, a look Clara never imagined she would receive. "You came," the woman whispered, her voice faint. "I didn't think you would." "I never stopped coming," Clara replied, stepping closer. "The difference is, before I came out of duty. Today, I'm here because I want to end what began the wrong way." Beatrice tried to smile. "It's strange." "What is?" "Being afraid to die and realizing that what haunts me isn't what I did, but what I never said." Clara took her hand, cold, thin, trembling. "There's still time." Beatrice drew a long breath. "I never knew how to love without control." The words came out broken but honest. "When I cast you out, I thought I was protecting my son. But really, I was only protecting my pride." A heavy silence filled the room. Clara held her hand gently, her gaze steady. "I know. And still, you're here." "I am. Because I've learned that forgiveness brings more freedom to the one who gives than to the one who receives." Tears slipped quietly down Beatrice's face. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. A light squeeze of Clara's hand. A long breath. The monitor let out that familiar, steady tone. But this time, there was no panic. There was peace. Clara remained still, watching. Beatrice slipped away without sound, without drama, simply dissolving into silence. Eduardo entered minutes later. When he saw them, he stopped. "She's gone?" Clara nodded. "Yes, and for the first time, I think in peace." Night fell slowly over the city. The funeral was simple, almost private. Eduardo stood through it all in silence. When everyone else had left, he remained alone beside the closed casket. Clara walked up quietly. He didn't turn to look at her, just said, "She admired you, more than she could ever admit." Clara stood beside him. "Sometimes love comes too late to change what was done." "And still, was it worth it?" he asked. "It was," she answered, "because even late, it was real." Days later, Clara returned to the institute. The windows were open, and the breeze carried the distant sound of children laughing in the courtyard. She climbed to the rooftop, the place she used to go when she needed to think. Eduardo appeared a few minutes later, carrying a wooden box in his hands. "This belonged to my mother," he said, placing it on the table. "She asked me to give it to you, if I ever found the courage." Clara opened the box gently. Inside was an old photograph, taken the day she and Eduardo had announced their engagement. The photo was folded, but well preserved, resting beside a letter. She unfolded it slowly. "Clara, time has taught us what pride never allowed us to see. If I'd had the courage to listen, perhaps we would have all been different. But if there's one thing I learned from you, it's that true love doesn't die. It transforms. Take care of it if there's still room for it. Beatrice." Clara said nothing. The breeze rustled softly, making the paper tremble in her hands. Eduardo stepped closer. "I didn't know about the letter." "I believe you," she replied. She needed to set herself free, too. He stood beside her for a while, staring at the horizon. Then he said, "I know I've lost the right to ask for anything." She looked at him, unhurried. "Then don't ask." "I just want you to know," he paused, "that I never stopped thinking about you." "I thought about you too," she replied softly. "But there's a difference between thinking and going back." The silence that followed was thick, heavy with memories. She placed the letter back in the box and closed it. "The past, Eduardo, is a country you don't live in. You only visit." He gave a faint, bittersweet smile. "And what if I want to come back? As a visitor?" Clara turned her gaze to the sky, where the clouds were beginning to part. "Then come with a light heart, because I no longer carry anything." Weeks turned into months. Eduardo kept showing up, always under the guise of administrative matters. But Clara knew. It was more than that. It was a quiet attempt at reconnection, not with who they had been, but with who they could be now. One night, after a long meeting, they found themselves alone in Clara's office. She was gathering papers when he said, "You know what impresses me most about you?" "What?" "You learned how to forgive, without ever bowing down." She looked at him. "Because forgiveness, Eduardo, isn't submission. It's sovereignty." "And love?" he asked. "What is love to you now?" She paused for a moment before answering. "Love is what remains when pride finally goes quiet." Silence lingered. He stepped forward, hesitated, then gently took her hand. Clara didn't pull away. They stood like that for a while. Just a touch. No promises. No rush. A simple gesture, carrying all that had been suspended for years. It wasn't love that ended. It was people who, out of fear, let it fall asleep. And now it was simply waking up. Different, more mature, less urgent. The months later, the Institute celebrated its first anniversary under new leadership. The auditorium was full. Clara stepped onto the stage for the closing speech. She spoke of new beginnings, of the strength of time, of the beauty in rebuilding without destroying. At the end, she looked out at the audience and saw Eduardo. He wasn't smiling. But his gaze said everything his voice didn't need to. When she stepped down, he was waiting. He extended his hand. She paused, then took it. They walked out together, beneath the applause, without looking back. Outside, the night was warm. The lights from the institute shimmered across the garden's reflecting pool. Clara stopped at the central fountain and looked at her own reflection. Eduardo stood beside her. "And now?" he asked. "Now," she answered, "I choose the path of my own story." The sound of water filled the air, and in that moment, Clara understood. The past had finally surrendered, not because she had conquered it, but because she had stopped fighting it. She had been cast out by her in-laws, and years later she was the one who decided the fate of the family. And for the first time, destiny chose her back. Time passed, not in a rush, but with the gentleness of something sacred, as if the universe itself had decided Clara finally deserved to live at a human pace. The institute flourished. People came from far and wide to witness the work that was quietly transforming lives. The old Faraz mansion, once a monument to pride and power, now housed classrooms, a community library, and a free rehabilitation wing. The walls that had once echoed with insults now held the voices of children, laughter, and music. It was the sound of restoration, the sound of what time had once promised to return. One crisp autumn morning, Clara arrived early at the institute. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, lighting the white curtains that danced with the breeze. She held a cup of coffee in one hand and an open notebook in the other. She liked to write down fragments, thoughts, memories, passing ideas. "Not every loss is absence," she wrote, and smiled quietly to herself. Outside, the garden was blanketed in golden leaves. The flowers from the previous spring had withered, yet something about them still felt beautiful, the quiet promise of another cycle. She sat on the wooden bench, the same one where, a year before, she'd shared her first honest conversation with Eduardo after all that time. Soft footsteps approached. She didn't need to look to know it was him. Eduardo stopped beside her, eyes on the garden. "Autumn seems to be your season," he said, breaking the silence. "It's when everything changes color, but nothing truly dies," she replied. He nodded, looking down at the carpet of leaves. "Transformation is silent, but it's what holds everything together." They sat quietly for a while, watching the world shift gently around them. The wind carried the scent of damp earth, mingled with the fragrance of trees. Eduardo sat beside her. The silence between them no longer weighed heavy. Now it was a form of comfort. "When I think about everything that happened," he said softly, "I realize fate wasn't cruel. It was just fair." Clara turned to him. "Justice often arrives disguised as loss." "You lost so much," he said. "No," she answered. "I let go of what was never mine to carry." There was a long pause. Eduardo took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Clara, I don't want what's left between us to be only the past." She met his gaze, serene, steady. "And what do you want it to be?" "A present, no promises, no debts, just now." She looked out toward the horizon. The sun was rising slowly, casting golden light across his face. "Now," she repeated. "That's a good beginning." They remained there, side by side. No kiss, no declarations. Just the unmistakable feeling that everything was finally in its right place, as if the universe had waited for that moment to settle into balance. That same afternoon, Clara stepped into the old bedroom of the mansion, now turned into a library. The shelves lined with books and memories also held objects that had quietly survived time. On the desk, an old picture frame, her and Eduardo, young, laughing. She stared at it for a moment, then gently turned it over, glass face down. The perfect symbol. Not to erase what was, but to let go of what still lingered. She closed the door softly behind her and walked downstairs. Outside, children played on the lawn, and among them a little girl with dark hair ran toward Clara, holding out a flower. "For you," she said, offering a small bouquet of wild blooms. Clara smiled. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Helena." Clara's breath caught. The girl's voice was light, innocent, carrying a distant echo as if fate, in a quiet gesture, had decided to return something she never truly forgot. She knelt down, accepting the flower. "It's a beautiful name. Take good care of it." Later that day, the Institute hosted a simple ceremony in honor of its founders. Clara stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. She didn't say much, but every word weighed more than 1,000 speeches. "This house, once a stage for pain and arrogance, is now a place of healing. It's not about what we inherit, but what we choose to transform. The past is the raw material of the future, and forgiveness is what shapes it." When she stepped down, the audience rose in applause, but what touched her most wasn't the applause. It was Eduardo's gaze, steady, silent, understanding without a single word. There are some rumors that later that evening, as she left the building, the sky had turned dark. The wind moved through the trees, and the lights from the facade shimmered in the surface of the central fountain. Clara stopped there, looked down at her own reflection in the water. She didn't see a victim, she didn't see a victor. She saw someone whole, finally reconciled with her own path. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The water shifted in the wind, distorting her image for a moment, and then, like a living mirror, settled into stillness again. That's how she felt. Eduardo approached and stood a few steps away. "I've been thinking about everything you said," he murmured. "About forgiveness, about time." Clara turned to him. "And what did you come to?" He smiled gently. "That maybe love, when it matures, doesn't need to win. It just needs to remain." She nodded, eyes calm. "To remain. That's it." They stood there for a long time, watching the moon reflect in the water. No more words, no more promises, just presence. The next morning, the main gates of the Institute opened to welcome a new group of volunteers. Clara walked among them, guiding, smiling. If there were a camera, it would follow her from a distance, quietly, as if bearing witness to the close of a cycle. The ambient sound would be the voices of children, the rustling of leaves, and the distant chime of bells from the chapel. As she walked away, a soft, whispered narration would begin. She was cast out by her in-laws, and years later, she became the one who decided the fate of the family. But what truly set her free wasn't power, nor revenge. It was silent forgiveness. The kind that announces nothing, yet changes everything. Because in the end, destiny always returns. But it only stays with those who've learned how to begin again. The final image, Clara seen from behind, walking into the soft light of dusk, her voice echoing in the background. And this time she knew. It wasn't chance, it was destiny, disguised as peace. Some stories don't end in forgiveness, they end in understanding. Clara didn't return to seek revenge. She came back to prove that peace is the final stage of strength. Because sometimes true power doesn't belong to those who win, but to those who choose to stop fighting. If you've ever had to walk away to find yourself again, if you've ever learned to forgive in silence, then you know what she felt. Time doesn't give back what was lost. It teaches us how to live with what remains until one day it becomes enough. Tell us in the comments where this story found you. Maybe you're listening from a small town, a quiet room, a heart under reconstruction. And if you are, know this, a new beginning doesn't need an audience, only courage. She was cast out by her in-laws, and years later she was the one who decided the fate of the family. But what no one saw was that the destiny she truly changed was her own.